I thought the worst day of my life would be the day I buried my mother, or maybe the day I miscarried our first child. But no, those weren't the days that shattered me. The day that broke me was far quieter. It was the moment I opened my husband's briefcase, saw the thick envelope marked property division agreement, and realized he'd been planning to divorce me all along. Not only that, he was planning to leave me with nothing. It was all there in black and white. His lawyer's notes, drafts of letters, even a proposed timeline file, the papers after his bonus cleared, transfer the assets to accounts I couldn't touch, then walk away like I was just some tenant who'd overstayed her lease. He didn't know I'd found the papers. He didn't know the woman he'd underestimated for over a decade was about to become his worst nightmare. Because if he thought I was just going to sit quietly while he erased my life, my sacrifices, and every ounce of my dignity, he was dead wrong. Before I tell you how I made him pay, and trust me, he paid in ways he never saw coming, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ever been underestimated. Because this isn't just my story. It's every woman's story who's ever been told to be quiet, to stay small, to give up her dreams for the good of the family. This is revenge served ice cold. My name's Rachel, and if you'd asked anyone in my small town 10 years ago what my future looked like, they would have said, she's going places. I was the girl with the scholarship offers, the one teachers whispered about with pride, saying, that one's gonna change the world. And then I met Aaron. Aaron wasn't for money, but he carried himself like he was destined for it. Charming, ambitious, the kind of guy who could talk his way into any room. He was 2 years older, already working as a junior analyst at a mid-tier investment firm in Chicago. To 20-year-old me, still wide-eyed and hopeful, he seemed like everything I wanted: stability, confidence, a man with a plan. We dated through my last year of college, and when he proposed right before graduation, I didn't hesitate. Everyone said, he's a catch, Rachel. You're lucky. I believed them. That's how I ended up standing at the altar at 22, my scholarship offers gathering dust while Aaron whispered promises about our future and building a life together. Once I make partner, he'd say, we'll travel. You'll never have to worry about anything. And I wanted to believe him. So I tucked away my acceptance letter to law school. I quit the part-time job that had been grooming me for management. And I threw myself into being the perfect wife, the supportive foundation Aaron could stand on while he climbed. At first it felt romantic. I packed his lunches, ironed his shirts, waited up for him after long nights at the office. When he came home exhausted, I listened to him vent about bosses who didn't appreciate him. I reminded him he was destined for more. When promotions came, we celebrated with cheap champagne on our thrift store couch. When they didn't, I reassured him he just had to be patient. I told myself my sacrifices were temporary, that once he made it, we'd make it. But temporary stretched into years. By the time I was 28, I'd lost count of the nights I ate alone, reheating leftovers while Aaron schmoozed at networking events. I had no career of my own, no savings, nothing that was truly mine. Meanwhile, Aaron started changing. He swapped his old Honda for a leased BMW. He traded beer for scotch. He started correcting the way I introduced myself at parties. Don't say stay at home, Rachel, he'd hiss under his breath.
Oh.
So you're focused on supporting me. It sounds better. I laughed it off at first, but little by little, the jokes turned sharp. Of course you don't get it. You've never worked in finance. Maybe you should read more. You sound naive sometimes. God, Rachel, do you even know how hard I work to keep this roof over your head? Each jab chipped away at me, but I swallowed it. 'Cause isn't that what good wives do? Then came the betrayals that weren't as easy to ignore. The lipstick on his collar he swore was from a client hug. The late-night texts from coworkers with too many heart emojis. The business trips that didn't match up with his credit card statements. I'd confront him, and he'd flip it back on me. You're paranoid. You're ungrateful. You'd have nothing without me. And worst of all, what else would you do, Rachel? Who would you even be without me? That one cut deepest. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Given up so much of myself for him that I couldn't picture a version of me that wasn't Aaron's wife. Then, one night, everything changed. Aaron came home late, half drunk, and tossed his briefcase onto the couch before stumbling into the shower. Normally, I wouldn't touch it, but something, call it instinct, made me open it. And that's when I saw it. The envelope. The notes. The entire plan for a divorce I hadn't even been warned was coming. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to make sure I walked away with nothing. No house, no savings, no alimony. Like I was disposable. Like a decade of my life had meant nothing. I sat there in the dark, papers trembling in my hands, rage and fear crashing through me in waves. That night, something inside me shifted. I'd spent years letting him write the story of my life, but if Aaron thought I'd let him dictate the ending, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The night I found those divorce papers, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every sound amplified, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the muffled splash of water as Aaron showered. When he finally crawled into bed smelling like whiskey and expensive cologne, I forced my body to stay still, study. He threw an arm across not quite least essential to the bed we divorced. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just kept staring at the shadows on the ceiling, thinking, he doesn't even know I know. He doesn't even realize he's already lost. But if I was going to survive this, I couldn't let him suspect. Not yet. The days that followed were torture. Every morning, I poured his coffee, kissed his cheek, and wished him luck at work, knowing damn well he was planning to cut me out of his life, like trimming fat off a steak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hurl the papers in his face and demand answers, but I couldn't. If I showed my hand too soon, he'd tighten his grip. He'd bury his tracks, and then I'd be trapped. So I played the part of the clueless wife. But inside I was unraveling. Every word he said twisted like a knife. Don't forget to call the cleaner, Rachel. We've got people coming over. Translation, you don't have a job, so stay useful. Maybe you should start watching what you eat. You don't want to let yourself go. Translation, I'm already imagining my life with someone younger, prettier, better. God, Rachel, you wouldn't understand. It's a finance thing. Translation, you're too stupid to matter. And every time he spoke, I heard it differently now. Not as my husband, but as my executioner, carefully sharpening the blade. I started watching him closer. His phone, always face down. The way he slipped out to take work calls on the balcony, voice low and conspiratorial. The way he triple-checked his briefcase before leaving for the office, like it contained state secrets. I noticed he'd started going to the gym more often. He bought new suits, tighter and flashier than his old ones. He trimmed his beard in a style I'd never seen before. It wasn't just about work. He was grooming himself for someone else. And me? I was the ghost in the house, present but irrelevant. One night, I overheard him on the phone in his office. His voice was soft, the kind of softness he hadn't used with me in years. Yeah, I'll take care of it soon, he murmured. Once the papers are finalized, it'll all be clean. Trust me, babe, you won't have to wait much longer. My stomach turned. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was replacing me. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. I stood there in the hallway, my knees trembling, staring at the closed door of the man I built my entire life around. That was the moment the grief hit me. I slipped into the bathroom, locked the door, and collapsed on the cold tile floor, sobbing into my hands. For 10 years, I had cooked his meals, claimed his shirts, cheered him on, held him together. And now he was whispering sweet nothings to some other woman, planning how to erase me like I'd been nothing more than a stepping stone. I cried until my throat burned, but when the tears finally dried, something else took their place. A cold, hard determination. If Aaron thought I was going to let him toss me aside, he was about to learn who I really was. But first, I had to endure. The weeks that followed were a test of endurance I wouldn't wish on anyone. I smiled through dinner parties while he bragged about promotions that never came. I scrubbed wine glasses and set tables while he flirted shamelessly with women in front of me. I nodded politely when his friends joked, "Man, Aaron, you've still got it. Rachel, better keep an eye on him." Better keep an eye on him. If only they knew. At night, I lay awake rehearsing my own lines. my own performance. Pretending not to notice the cologne that wasn't mine clinging to his jacket. Pretending not to see the lipstick smudge on his receipts. Pretending I didn't know about the second phone he kept hidden in his glove box. Every day was a performance, and every performance left me hollow. And then came the humiliations. One evening, he came home late again. I was sitting at the table, a roast growing cold in front of me, the candles burned down to wax puddles. He walked in, loosened his tie, and smirked. "You didn't wait for me, did you?" I gestured to the untouched plate. "Of course I waited." He laughed, cool and sharp. "Why, so we could play house? Rachel, you really have nothing better to do you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I just wanted to spend time together." "Time together?" He rolled his eyes. "God, Rachel, I'm working my ass off to give us this life, and you're sitting here like some 1950s sitcom wife. Grow up." He didn't see the way my hands clenched under the tablecloth. He didn't see the storm building in my chest. Another night, we were at a dinner with his colleagues. One of the wives asked me, "Kindly, what do you do?" Before I could answer, Aaron cut in. "Oh, she doesn't do much. Just keeps the house in order. You know, domestic stuff." The table chuckled politely. My cheeks burned. I opened my mouth to correct him, to say I'd sacrificed law school, that I was more than just domestic stuff. But the words stuck in my throat, because who would believe me now? That night, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. My hair dull, my eyes tired, my reflection blurred with years of exhaustion. "Who are you?" I whispered to the woman staring back at me. And for the first time in years, I didn't have an answer. But slowly, silently, I began to rebuild myself. I started journaling again, filling notebooks with every detail. Dates, receipts, overheard phone calls, even snippets of conversation. I became my own detective, collecting the evidence he thought I was too naive to see. I met quietly with an old college friend who was now a lawyer. We had coffee in a tiny cafe 2 towns over, where Aaron would never think to look. She explained my rights, the loopholes he was trying to exploit, the traps hidden in the paperwork. I learned how much of our money was in joint accounts, what assets were in his name alone, and how he planned to move them before filing. Knowledge became my armor. But the hardest part wasn't the law. It was pretending. Every morning, I had to look him in the eye, pour his coffee, and smile like nothing had changed. Every night, I had to endure his insults, his late arrivals, his cold shoulder, knowing that behind his back, I was preparing to destroy the story he thought he controlled. It was like living in a house on fire, while quietly laying the pipes for a sprinkler system he didn't know existed. And the fire was spreading. One night, Aaron came home drunk again. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to read. He slumped into the chair opposite me, loosened his tie, and smirked. "Yeah," he slurred. "You really should be grateful. Not every woman gets to live like this. Some of your friends are probably still slumming it in apartments, working 9 to 5, chasing paychecks. You've got it easy." I forced a smile. "Yes, Aaron, I'm very grateful." He raised his glass like a toast, to being smart enough to marry up. My blood turned to ice. Marry up. That was what I was to him. Not a partner, not a wife. Just a lucky little nobody who had caught a rising star. That night, I cried again, but not out of grief, out of rage. Because I realized then that he hadn't just betrayed me. He had rewritten me in his mind, turned me into some gold digger who should thank him for the scraps he gave me. And I swore, right there in the dark, that before this was over, the world would know exactly who had been carrying who. Every story has a breaking point, the moment when endurance hardens into action. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday morning, with the sunlight streaming weakly through the kitchen blinds. Aaron had left early, muttering something about a client breakfast. I was cleaning up the crumbs from his rushed toast when his phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, he never left it behind. It was practically glued to him. But today, he was careless. I froze. The screen lit up with a message from C. "Can't wait until it's official. Dinner tonight?" My hand trembled as I scrolled. Threads of messages stretched back weeks. Flotation, promises, pictures I couldn't stomach looking at. She wasn't just a fling. She was the replacement. I sank into the kitchen chair, the phone heavy in my hands. For months, I'd known he was planning to leave me. But seeing her words, the casual intimacy, the way he promised her our future, it lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. He wasn't just stealing my marriage. He was trying to steal the life I had sacrificed for him. And I decided in that moment, I would not walk away empty-handed. I copied the messages. Every photo, every promise, every date-stamped conversation. I uploaded them to a hidden cloud folder, labeled innocuously as recipes. Then I deleted the activity log and returned the phone to the counter, exactly as I'd found it. That was the morning I stopped being his victim and started being his opponent. The first step was clarity. I made lists, long, detailed lists, what we owned, what was in both our names, what was technically mine, though he didn't think I'd be smart enough to claim it. Our house, his 401k, the joint savings account, the car titles. I dug up old emails, bank statements, even insurance paperwork he'd left scattered in his desk. Every scrap of information became a weapon. And slowly a picture emerged. Aaron wasn't as clever as he thought. He'd left trails everywhere. Unexplained transfers, hidden accounts, business reposes that were really gifts for her. I cataloged it all. The second step was allies. I called my old friend, Claire the lawyer, who quietly walked me through my rights weeks earlier. We met in a diner far from our neighborhood, my notebook hidden under the table. She flipped through my evidence, her eyebrows climbing higher with each page. "Rachel," she whispered, "do you realize what you have here?" I shook my head. "Enough to protect myself?" Her lips curved into a sharp smile. "Enough to destroy him." We mapped out the strategy like generals planning a war. Step 1, gather irrefutable proof of infidelity. Done. Step 2, track financial misdeeds. Every dollar funneled toward his mistress. Every shady transfer. In progress. Step 3, time the filing so that it blindsided him exactly the way he intended to blindside me. "Patience," Claire warned. "You'll want to lash out, but timing is everything. Let him dig his own grave, then we strike." I nodded, gripping my coffee mug like it was the only solid thing in my life. At home, the act continued. I played the doting wife, serving his dinners, laughing at his jokes, folding his shirts. But now, I was listening differently. Every slip of his tongue, every late-night call, every careless receipt became ammunition. One night, he came home humming, drunk on his own charm. He tossed his jacket onto the couch, a hotel receipt slipping out of the pocket. I picked it up silently after he went to bed. 2 nights in a suite downtown, charged to his corporate card. I smiled as I tucked it into my growing folder. But the hardest part was emotional endurance. Because even as I plotted, he continued his campaign of erosion. "Rachel, maybe you should take up a hobby. You've got too much free time." "God, you really don't get how money works, do you?" "Sometimes, I think you'd be lost without me." Each jab stung. But now, instead of breaking me, they steeled me. Because I knew what he didn't, that soon those words would be his undoing. Weeks turned into months. My evidence pile grew thick enough to fill a banker's box. Claire drafted motions in secret, advising me to keep my poker face until the moment came. And all the while, Aaron grew bolder. He stopped bothering to hide his absences. He bought his mistress jewelry, charging it to our joint account. He even joked on night at dinner with friends. "You know, Rachel would be lost without me. I practically raised her." The table laughed. I smiled sweetly, though inside I was already scripting the day I'd watch that smug grin crumble. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. Aaron had gone golfing, his phone buzzing on the counter again. I hesitated, then picked it up. Another message from C. "Can't believe you're still dragging this out. She doesn't deserve a dime. Just cut her loose already." My hand shook. She didn't just want him, she wanted my erasure. I stared at those words until the letters blurred. And then, slowly, I smiled. Because she had no idea that the woman she thought was disposable had already built the trap they were both about to walk into. That night, I sat across from Aaron at dinner. He was half listening, scrolling through his phone, smirking at whatever she was sending. And I thought, you have no idea. You think you're weeks away from freedom, but really, you're weeks away from ruin. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. From then on, the planning consumed me. Claire and I fine-tuned every detail. The financial records would prove marital waste money spent on his affair could be reimbursed to me. The messages and photos would prove adultery, tilting the court's sympathy in my favor. The hidden accounts would expose his attempts at fraud. "Rachel," Claire said one night, "when this hits, he won't just lose the divorce. He'll lose his reputation. His career could take a hit too." I looked her in the eye, my voice steady. "Good." I practiced my testimony in the mirror, rehearsing calm responses while imagining Aaron's smug expression crumbling under cross-examination. I even prepared my life after apartment listings, job applications, rekindling old friendships I'd abandoned during my years as Mrs. Aaron. Each small act felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. But the most dangerous part was keeping the mask on at home. One night, Aaron stumbled in late, reeking of perfume that wasn't mine. He smirked at me. "Still awake? Don't wait up next time." I smiled sweetly. "Of course, dear." He didn't see the storm in my eyes. The night before everything was set to launch, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again. But this time, there was no fear, only anticipation. Tomorrow, the papers would be filed. Tomorrow, Aaron's carefully constructed fantasy would implode. Tomorrow, he'd learn that the wife he dismissed, belittled, and betrayed was not his victim. She was his reckoning. The morning of the filing, I woke up before dawn. The house was quiet, sunlight just beginning to creep over the horizon. I padded into the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table with my folder of evidence spread before me. Every page, every receipt, every screenshot felt like a weapon sharpened to perfection. Months of pretending, months of swallowing my pride and collecting proof, it all led here. By 9 a.m., Claire had filed the divorce petition, not his petition, mine, with adultery, financial waste, and fraud listed in bold black letters. By 10 a.m., a process server was walking into Aaron's office, a thick envelope in hand. By noon, my phone buzzed. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" His voice was sharp, panicked. "You filed? Are you out of your mind?" I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "I told you once, Aaron, you don't get to write the ending of my story." There was a pause. I could practically hear his jaw clenching. Then he exploded. "You think you're clever. You think this will work. You don't know what you've started." "Oh, I know exactly what I've started," I said, my voice steady, "and I have the receipts to finish it." I hung up before he could respond. That was the first crack in Aaron's perfect facade. The second came that evening, when he stormed into the house, papers in hand, face red with fury. He slammed the petition down on the counter. "You've ruined everything!" he shouted. "No, Aaron," I said calmly. "You did that yourself. I just made sure the court saw it." He glared at me, eyes blazing. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I'm respected. I'm successful. You're nothing without me." I stepped closer, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Then explain these." I laid out the photos, the text messages, the hotel receipts. His face drained of color as the reality sank in. "You went through my things," he muttered weakly. "You left them for me to find," I countered. "I just paid attention." The weeks that followed were chaos for him. For me, they were vindication. At the first court hearing, his lawyer tried to paint me as the bitter wife, clinging to a man who'd outgrown her. But then Claire stood up, her voice calm and precise, and laid out the evidence. Exhibit A, screenshots of Aaron's text messages to his mistress. Exhibit B, financial records showing thousands siphoned from our joint account for gifts and hotel rooms. Exhibit C, proof of hidden accounts he hadn't disclosed. The judge's expression hardened with each piece of evidence. Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. And when Claire handed over the final folder, the one containing photos of Aaron and his mistress at a corporate event he'd claimed was strictly business, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Aaron's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. By the end of that day, temporary orders were granted in my favor. Aaron was barred from moving assets. I was awarded access to funds for living expenses. And Aaron, he was left sputtering, his perfect image cracking wide open. But the courtroom wasn't the only battlefield. Word spread fast through his firm. Someone leaked the details. Maybe a colleague, maybe a friend who enjoyed watching him squirm. Either way, whispers turned into open conversations. By the time Aaron walked into the office one Monday morning, half his team already knew about the mistress. They knew about the financial misconduct. They knew the truth he'd tried to bury. And suddenly, the man who had strutted around bragging about his promotions found himself excluded from meetings, his calls ignored, his reputation crumbling. At home, the unraveling was even more pathetic. Aaron tried every tactic. First, rage. "You'll regret this, Rachel. You can't live without me." Then pity. "Please, Rachel, think about all we've been through. Don't do this." And finally, bargaining. "If you just drop the case, I'll give you the house. Isn't that what you want?" Each time, I looked him in the eye and said the same thing. I want the truth to come out. The day the final judgment was issued, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. The judge awarded me the house, a fair share of the savings, and spousal support. More importantly, the court acknowledged Aaron's misconduct, his affair, his deceit, his financial betrayal. Aaron sat slumped in his chair, pale and silent, while the judge read the ruling. The same man who once mocked me for having no backbone couldn't even look me in the eye. When it was over, I walked out into the sunlight, papers in hand, feeling lighter than I had in years. But the sweetest part? It wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. It was the knowledge that Aaron would have to wake up every day knowing he had underestimated me and lost everything because of it. The fallout was brutal for him. His mistress, realizing the financial gravy train had dried up, vanished within weeks. His firm, embarrassed by the scandal, quietly pushed him out. He went from being the golden boy to a cautionary tale. And me? I started over. I rented a small office, dusted off my old law school materials, and enrolled in a certification program. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I was building something of my own. Months later, I ran into an old acquaintance at the grocery store. She'd heard the rumors. "Rachel, I can't believe what you've been through," she said softly. "How did you survive it?" I smiled. By remembering that being underestimated is the sharpest weapon you can ever have. They never see you coming. When the dust settled, Aaron's empire wasn't just cracked, it was in ruins. His firm had always prided itself on discretion and integrity. But once my case became public record, there was no way to hide the scandal. Colleagues whispered in hallways, clients made excuses to take their business elsewhere, and soon Aaron was quietly asked to resign. For a man whose entire identity was wrapped around his career, it was the ultimate humiliation. I heard about it not from him, but from one of his old coworkers, who ran into me at the farmer's market. "You really did a number on him," she said, half in awe, half in disbelief. "He used to walk around here like he was untouchable. Now, he's a ghost." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was in knowing the truth was finally visible to everyone who had once believed his facade. Socially, he fared no better. The dinner parties dried up. The invitations stopped. Friends who once laughed at his jokes now avoided him, not wanting to be tainted by association. And the mistress? Gone. The moment she realized Aaron couldn't provide the glittering lifestyle he'd promised, she slipped out of his life without a trace. He'd traded a loyal life for a fantasy, and ended up with nothing. Meanwhile, I began to stitch my life back together piece by piece. The house was mine, but it felt haunted by memories, so I sold it and bought a small condo near the university. It wasn't lavish, but it was cozy and mine alone. I enrolled in evening classes, brushing up on the education I'd once abandoned. Walking into that classroom for the first time, textbooks tucked under my arm, I felt like I was 20 again, but this time I wasn't sacrificing my future for anyone else. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, mornings when the weight of what I'd endured still pressed heavy on my chest, but every step forward reminded me that I was no longer defined by Aaron's shadow. For the first time in over a decade, my life was mine. Aaron tried to reach out, of course. Pathetic phone calls at odd hours. "Rachel, can we talk? We don't have to be enemies. We were good once. Doesn't that mean anything? Please, I need someone to talk to. Each time I let the calls go to voicemail. Because the truth was, we had never been good. We had been convenient for him. And now, without me to prop him up, he was just a hollow man screaming into the void. The final act of his downfall came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was at a networking event for my classes, sipping wine and chatting with other students, when I saw him. Aaron. He was thinner, his suit wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He wasn't surrounded by admirers anymore, just standing awkwardly by the bar, clutching a glass like it was a lifeline. Our eyes met. For a moment, he tried that old smile, the one that used to charm me into forgiving anything, but it faltered, because now he knew I saw him for what he truly was. I didn't walk over. I didn't give him the satisfaction of acknowledgement. I turned back to my conversation, laughing at something my new friend said, and in that moment, I realized the real revenge wasn't the money or the house or even the court ruling. The real revenge was living well without him. Aaron had tried to erase me, but in the end, he erased himself. And me? I was finally free. Looking back now, it's almost surreal to think about the woman I used to be. The Rachel who cooked roasts that went cold on the table, who bit her tongue at dinner parties, who cried quietly in locked bathrooms so her husband wouldn't see her break. That woman believed love meant sacrifice, that loyalty would protect her, that if she gave enough of herself, she'd be valued. But the truth was harsh. I had tied my worth to a man who saw me as disposable. And when he tried to discard me, it almost worked. Almost. But betrayal has a strange way of becoming a mirror. It showed me not only who Aaron really was, but who I had become under his shadow. Weak, dependent, invisible. And it forced me to ask myself, is this all I was meant to be? The answer, of course, was no. I won't lie and say the journey was easy. Revenge is never just about the courtroom or the paperwork. It's about survival. It's about clawing your way through nights of doubt, mornings of despair, and days of pretending you're fine when you're not. But somewhere along the way, my anger transformed into clarity. I realized I didn't just want to hurt Aaron. I wanted to reclaim myself. And I did. Today, my life looks nothing like it did before. I wake up in my own space, filled with plants and sunlight and quiet peace. I spend my days studying, writing, and building a career that's mine alone. I go out with friends without asking for permission. I laugh without fear of being mocked. I'm not someone's wife. I'm not someone's burden. I'm me. And Aaron? He's a ghost. A lesson. A cautionary tale. Once upon a time, he thought he held all the power. But now, he wakes up every day in a smaller apartment, with fewer friends, staring at the cracks in the empire he tried to build on lies. His mistress left. His colleagues turned their backs. His career is a shadow of what it once was. And every time he thinks of me, and I know he does, he has to live with the truth. I won. But more importantly, I healed. Because revenge, when it's pure, isn't just about bringing someone else down. It's about rising from the ashes they tried to bury you in. Aaron thought he was ending my story, but really, he gave me the beginning of a new one. So here's my reflection, the piece I hope you hold on to. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume silence means weakness, because sometimes silence is just strategy. And when the moment comes, the ones you thought were powerless will be the ones who leave you with nothing. So, what do you think? Did Aaron get exactly what he deserved? If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same, or gone even further? Let me know in the comments, because I love hearing your stories and perspectives. And if this story hit you the way it hit me living it, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or dismissed, make sure you hit that like button. It tells me that these stories matter to you, and it helps more people find them. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because there are so many more tales of justice, karma, and revenge waiting to be told. And trust me, you don't want to miss them. Until next time, remember this: the best revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is living well while the people who hurt you watch from the sidelines. And that's exactly what I'm doing.